1956 in Suva, and my parents emigrated with my brother and my sister and I in 1961, and we went to Tulsa, Oklahoma because my dad was offered a job there, and we lived there, and that was pretty dramatic and traumatic for my parents, I think. I think immigrating when you're young, when you're that young, it's all a big adventure, and it's really, you don't really realize what a culture shock it is for your parents, because it really, I think young children assimilate so much easier. So for us it was a big adventure, but moving to Tulsa in the Midwest in November, the middle of winter, and my parents really had a hard time adjusting to that, but they were very adventurous people themselves, and even though it was difficult, I think they were really glad they came to the U.S., and my dad's brothers were already living in California, so that was a big draw for my parents as well. And for us it was, as I said, I think my first real disappointment about living in the U.S. was when I started going to school, and we lived in the Midwest, and we were the only dark kids in school, and because we lived in the Midwest there were a lot of Native American reservations, so kids in my class would say, why was I in their school? Why wasn't I living on an Indian reservation? And I didn't know what that meant, and I was really puzzled by that, and I thought so I never had to think about my skin color or where I was from or how I spoke or any of that, and until that moment in time. And I think the positive thing was that my parents grew up in Christian boarding schools, so they spoke English, and we always heard it at home. So it's not like we had to learn another language coming here. Like immigration now is so different. You come here and you don't know the language. Well, my parents were really lucky, and we were really lucky. They spoke English to us at home. The downside of that was I speak very little Hindi now, and because we always spoke English at home, and we didn't speak both because my parents were trying to get us to speak English as much as possible. And I think that's probably a big downside, because my kids don't speak Hindi, and I understand it, but I really haven't passed that on. Yeah, I think, and then moving to California with our family living here was great because it was our cousins, and then I think at that time there were maybe 10 or 12 Indian families from Fiji who lived in the Bay Area, and we started the first Fiji club, which was really awesome, and we knew them all, and everybody got together every weekend, and we created this amazing community of family and friends here in the Bay Area, and we knew everyone really intimately, and that was really great. But then I think growing up as a teenager, it became more of a challenge, because when you're growing up and you in a country where nobody really knows you, you get to assimilate as much as you want. So we lived these sort of double lives then, where at school we were just, American kids, and at home, because as we got older and there were more social rules that came into play that were more traditional Indian social rules that we'd never actually been brought up with. We were sort of like, what's wrong with our parents? So I think that was challenging for us, and to be Indian and then to be American, but then there were other things that we loved about being Indian, the music, the food, all of that stuff was just really awesome. And but I don't think I appreciated it as much as I did when I went away to school, and then my friends were like, oh, can you make Indian food? And so I think that as the years have gone by, I really, really value being an Indian, but I really value being an Indian from Fiji, because when I go to Fiji to visit and I step off the plane, for some reason I just feel like I'm at home and I belong there. And it's just this thing about Fiji being such a special place. It was so multicultural, and I think there were no there were a lot of social rules that were broken there, and they forcibly, because well, historically, because of the way that the Hindus and Muslims and Christians were all sort of pushed together. And we come from very untraditional families where my dad and my mom were both brought up in boarding schools and not always in the home, and so it was very different. And so I think because of that, I have a very broad outlook on life in general, and I'm sort of very open-minded, and I really appreciate that. And yeah.